to this day, to this opportunity to be together in community, which is a time of joy, comfort, and sometimes challenges. This Unitarian Universalist congregation is a place where we come to learn more about being human. We're not here because we've figured out life's questions or because we think we've got it right. We come here to learn more about being in relationship together, how to listen, how to forgive, how to be vulnerable, and how to create compassion with one another. We at Emerson believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and all are welcomed here. Good morning, my name is Bernadine Cataletta, and I serve on the worship committee. I'd like to welcome those of you who are joining us for the first time, or perhaps are returning after an absence. We hope that you are nourished in heart and mind by our worship today. Our ritual table is decorated to celebrate Diwali. Diwali is the festival of lights celebrated by Hindus. The festival usually lasts 5 days and celebrated during the Hindu lunisolar month of Kartartik. Diwali symbolizes the spiritual victory of light over darkness, good over evil, and knowledge over ignorance. I want to offer a special welcome to our speaker today, Azada Shahshahani. She is the Legal and Advocacy Director of Project South and the past president of the National Lawyers Guild. Azada's work defending the rights of immigrants is extensive. Among her many accomplishments, she has worked in the U.S. South to protect and defend immigrants, as well as the Muslim, Middle Eastern, and South Asian communities. She has served as the National Security and Immigrants' Rights Project Director with the ACLU of Georgia. Azada is a prolific writer where she has authored and edited several human rights reports. Her writings have appeared in The Guardian, The Nation, MSNBC, and Al Jazeera, among others. Welcome, Azada. We are honored to have you speak with us today. Azada will facilitate sermon reflections after the service at 11:15. Just follow the link in your order of service. And now for our chalice lighting. These words are adapted from Melanie Davis. To face the world's shadows, let this be a chalice of light. To face the world's coldness, let this be a chalice of warmth. To face the world's turmoil, let this be a chalice of peace. May the glow of this chalice fill our spirits, our hearts, and our lives. As we begin our worship together, please take a moment to greet those sitting with you or on the online chat by sharing our congregational affirmation. We need not think alike to love alike.
My name is Azada Shahshahani, and I work with Project South. We are a social justice organization based in Atlanta, and we work in support of grassroots organizations and directly impacted communities in the US South, as well as the Global South. We are part of a movement that believes systemic state violence is not to be tolerated in any form, whether it is ICE caging and harming immigrants or cops murdering Black people in the street with impunity.
Please join us in singing hymn 1020, Wo Ya Ya. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows where we will get there, but we know we will. Oh ya ya, oh ya ya, oh ya ya, oh ya ya. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh ya ya, 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 oh ya
Hello, I'm Noel Garwick, and this is this week's Story for All Ages. So this is a story about a family of ducks. There are two parents, and there are 12 little eggs, all going on a long journey from where they were from to a brand new town called Citizenship. Now, Citizenship had a problem, and that was that it was brand new. No one was there yet. So they'd sent out a bunch of letters, and they'd sent out hot air balloons with messages hanging from them. They had people riding in the sky and whatnot. And they'd encourage a lot of people to come in and, start farms, start up businesses, and all that. So this duck family went on the journey to do just that. So along the way, one of the little eggs started to shake and wobble, and it started to kind of crack. And after a little bit, it popped right open. And guess what popped out? Well, a baby duck. And this little baby's duck's name was Pato. So Pato, when he hopped out, he looked around, and Pato liked what he saw so far. And he noticed too that it was a lot colder and chillier out here than it was in that egg. So when he snuck down under some of the blankets that they brought with them and found in some bread and chewed on that and fell asleep. So the next day, while he was still hidden under there, the tired family arrived at the border to Citizenship. And one of the parents popped out and they started talking to the guard that was there. They said, "Hey, we've heard you're looking for people. We'd like to move in." And the guard said, Of course. So we've got a few simple rules here. First one is you have to sign this paper. All right. So the duck went and he signed the paper. And he said, and the next one is you got to say our oath. All right. Well, what's the oath? Repeat after me. Ipamapamupam. Ipamapamupam. Ratata ratata. Ratata ratata. Hudu usa usa usa. Is that it? Yeah, that's it. Okay. Hudu usa usa usa. All right. Everyone started clapping. They shot off some fireworks. They made a big deal of it. And I said, okay, and you're free to go through. And the guard went and he counted each of the little eggs, and he tore off a little ticket, a little coupon to each of the parents, and he went and he gave them 11 little coupons for the little eggs. And the parents kind of looked at the guard and said, well, what are these for? And he said, well, these are your birth coupons, okay? And you got to hold on to them because someday if you ever want to buy land or vote or do anything like that, you'll need to have this to show that you belong here. Oh, all right. And the ducks thought that was a little silly, but whatever. So they went through the border and they got some land. And Pato's parents started a farm and they started growing apples. And these were the best apples that anyone in the area had ever seen because they hadn't seen apples before. They were brand new. They brought them from where they were from. And eventually, the Pato and all the other brothers and sisters of Pato grew up, and they would help out at the market where they go to sell the apples. And everyone was always a buzz. And this was kind of the big draw to the market, was that they had these really good, strange foreign fruit that was here. And that kind of got everyone else to go there to buy the turnips and buy all the other stuff that, you kind of need to eat, but people weren't going to wake up in the morning to go over and grab. And eventually, Pato grew up all the way until he was a big duck, and he started a family of his own. And he realized that he was wanting to go buy a farm. So he went up to the Capitol building, and he asked if he could buy a farm. They said, of course you can. You got the money. You're established in the community. You just need to show us your birth coupon. So Pato went home. He looked for it. He couldn't find it. And he came back and he asked, and they said, well, okay, look, I know this seems kind of weird, but if you can't find it, we got to send you back home. And Pato said, well, what do you mean? This is my home. And they said, sure, but without that coupon, not really. Not really, said Pato. No, but it's okay. Go ahead and go home, look again, and, we'll send someone by to check on you tomorrow. So Pato went home, and he told his partner all about it, and that was a very wise duck, and she said, okay, I got a plan. And she went out to each of their friends in the community, all the dogs and cats and farm animals and etc. And she gave each of them a bunch of feathers and some glue. And she told them the plan, and they said to go wait till the next morning when the Imperial Chief Enforcer was going to show up. And the Imperial Chief Enforcer is the guy that makes sure you have your birth coupon. So that morning, he showed up, and he saw that there was not just Pato, there were dozens of ducks all standing around. At least they looked like ducks. What they really were is that overnight all the animals had taken the glue and they put feathers on themselves and everything, so that when the Imperial Chief Enforcer, or ICE for short, showed up and said, wait, which one of you is Pato? There was a goose that said, I'm Pato. And there was a rabbit that said, I'm Pato. And a little tiny mouse that said, I'm Pato. And all the other animals said that. And the enforcer, ICE, he was just shocked. And he said, well, I wasn't really expecting this, but I think my cart's big enough. Come on. And he went and he led all of them onto the cart, and he drove them down over to the border, and he dropped them off on the other side. And he said, well, this is your home now, but don't worry. You can get back. You just have to go over there. And he pointed, and off in the distance they could see a line past the hills and valleys and the rivers and etc. And he said, if you follow that, eventually you'll make it back to citizenship. You can get your coupon, and you'll be good to go. So everyone kind of looked at each other, and they didn't want to leave Pato alone. So they said, okay, fine, we'll go on the journey with you. So that's what they did. So some time passed, and things weren't looking good at the market. Because without those apples to attract everyone, no one wanted to show up. And they didn't want to buy the radishes, or the turnips either, right? And that's the problem, because since no one was buying turnips, that stalk market was at an all-time low. And eventually the news of this got up to the queen bee. And she started asking around and saying, well, what's going on? Why are people not buying turnips? And people said, well, because Pato's not here. So she said, well, where is this Pato? And I said, he's over there. And they pointed off to the distance. So bzzz, she flew off to go visit him. And eventually she spotted him along a windy, crazy line to get back, to their town of citizenship. And she talked to him, and they kind of shared their stories. And Pato, said, "Yeah, well, I didn't have this coupon, and yada yada." And the queen said, "Okay, well, you know what? Look, the reason we have those coupons is to keep wolves out, and I can tell you're not a wolf. We don't have them to hassle apple farmers. So why don't I go fly you back, and you can just come and you can cut through the line." But I said, "Well, that's not really fair, is it? I mean, what about all the other people here?" And the bee went and she looked around, and she said, "You know what? Yeah, that's not really fair, is it? This is kind of more complicated than I realized." And Pato and his friends kind of nodded and shook their heads and said, "Yeah, it's a little complicated." So they talked some more, and eventually they got a plan. And they all worked together, and they took that big windy path that had the hills and the valleys and the caves and all that. And they helped flatten it down, and they helped take that big windy area and kind of tamed it until it was one straight, easy to follow little road. And this way things moved quickly, they were efficiently, and it was fair, and everyone was happy. And it turned out that all it took to get everyone happy and on the same page was creating a clear and easy path to citizenship.
People who lived on the land before us. May this candle remind us of our interconnection, and may our actions help heal all nations of people. And Bernadine will light our candles today as I share these joys and concerns with you. Laurel Wickman had an emergency appendectomy on Wednesday and is back home recuperating now. She is thankful for the medical staff that pulled her through a scary time. And it's a joy from the fundraising committee that we had such a successful, fun fundraising event. And thank you to all the people who donated and bid, and to our wonderful B. Keys and Reverend D for making it such a fun, successful time, and Emerson made over $8,000. And we light a special candle, and we know that there are also sorrows and concerns left unspoken today. As Bernadine lights candles for them, please feel free to speak aloud the name of anyone you are holding closely in your hearts this morning. Let us all send our heartfelt, caring intentions to all people everywhere by offering the Buddhist prayer of loving kindness. The words are projected here and also printed in your order of service. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May they be free from harm and suffering. May they be well in body, heart, and mind. May they be at peace. Blessed be. And we light a special candle today in honor of transgender people in our country who have lost their lives due to violence. James Pote shares a special message with us about Transgender Day of Remembrance and speaks aloud their names.
The Transgender Day of Remembrance was first observed in 1999. Today, we ask that you bring your attention to the struggles of transgender people in our country. From January to October of this year, at least 32 transgender people were murdered in the U.S. This is the highest number since the Human Rights Campaign began tracking in 2013. Violence against trans women of color is especially high. Friends and family members of those killed are left hopeless and angry. These are disturbing facts. It takes courage to draw the circle wide and allow ourselves to recognize and share in the suffering of others. It takes even more courage for transgender people to live authentically, to risk rejection and sometimes violence. Today, we speak their names as a memorial. Dustin Parker, Neolisa Luciano Ruiz, Jampi Mendez Arrocho, Monica Diamond, Lexi, Johanna Metzger, Serena Angelique Velázquez Ramos, Leila Palais Sanchez, Penelope Diaz Ramirez, Nina Pop, Hella J. O'Regan, Tony McDade, Dominique Remy Fells, Rhea Milton, Jane Thompson, Selena Reyes Hernandez, Brian Egypt Powers, Brayla Stone, Mercy Mack, Shaky Peters, Bree Black, Summer Taylor, Marilyn Cazares, Dior Oba, Keisha D. Hardy, Aja Raquel Ron Spears, Key Sam, Ariane Burnett, Mia Green, Michelin Ramos Vargas, Felicia Harris, who was murdered in Augusta, Georgia last month, Brooklyn Deshuna, Sarah Blackwood, Angel Unique.
I invite you into a time of meditation or prayer, as is your practice, followed by a moment of silence. This meditation is adapted from the inscription on the Statue of Liberty. Emma Lazarus wrote this poem in 1883, where she pictures the Statue of Liberty as the new Colossus, the patroness of immigrants, rather than a symbol of mighty might, military might. Unlike the brazen giant Colossus of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land, here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is imprisoned lightning. and her name is Mother of Exiles. From the beacon in her hand glows a worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command, keep ancient lands, your storied pomp. She cries with silent lips, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, the tempest lost, to me. I lift my lamp beside this golden door.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. A long ways from home, a long ways from home, a long ways from home, a long ways from home. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. A long ways from home, a long ways from home, a long ways from home, a long ways from home.
We have documented conditions at Irving for many years. The treatment of immigrants at this prison has always been horrid. In our 2017 report, In Prison Justice, Inside 2 Georgia Immigrant Detention Centers, Project South and the Penn State Law Center for Immigrants' Rights Clinic found evidence of sexual abuse, inadequate medical care, lack of prenatal care for pregnant women, lack of clean drinking water, and rampant use of solitary confinement at the facility. In April, a group of women came together and produced a video about the conditions at the facility and to express their fear about catching COVID and the fact that the facility was not doing anything to protect them against the disease. And instead of addressing their concerns, The facility, run by a private prison corporation, La Salle, retaliated against them by placing them in solitary confinement. And as a result, the women involved in making the video all experienced grave emotional damage. Given what we were hearing from the detained women, as well as the fact that we were representing Ms. Dawn Wooten, a courageous whistleblower, along with the Government Accountability Project, who was separately telling us about the abuses at the facility, we decided to submit a complaint to the Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General, along with GLAR, Georgia Detention Watch, South Georgia Support Network. Some of the issues that we documented in this complaint are that medical staff are deliberately not testing detained immigrants for COVID-19, even when they are symptomatic, have pre-existing conditions, and or have requested to be tested multiple times spanning a month. Medical staff shredding medical requests from detained immigrants and fabricating medical records for them, falsely indicating that they have been seen. The management mandating employees to work, even if they're symptomatic and waiting for test results. The management deliberately lying to both detained immigrants and employees about how many COVID cases there are at the facility. And the shocking revelations about medical abuse against women's bodies further highlight the extent of the egregious abuses at the facility. The fact that Black and brown immigrant women have been held in an extremely vulnerable position at this prison, where they have no control over their bodies and no say about what is done to them, is sickening. We are glad that our complaint opened the door to more women coming forward with accounts of what was done to them. 19 cases have now been documented by the Los Angeles Times, and 57 cases have been documented by our team of lawyers, as reported by The Intercept recently. Not surprisingly, ICE has not been forthcoming with information. If it was not because of the documentation work happening and advocates' efforts to track down and reach out to women all over the world and courage of the impacted women, none of this would have ever come to light. And I should say that ICE is actually actively attempting to deport the survivors and witnesses to medical abuse at Irving as we speak. Given what we have learned about the systematic violence against immigrants' women's bodies at Irving, we need ICE to come clean about what is happening at facilities nationwide. Immigrants cannot have their bodily integrity at the mercy of ICE and the private prisons corporations that the agency contracts with. And that is why we filed a FOIA to obtain information about gynecological procedures at ICE facilities nationwide over a month ago. We have yet to receive any information, and that is why we partnered with a couple of other groups to sue ICE for records a couple of weeks ago. It pains me to know that there could be many more women out there who will never be able to talk about what happened to them and the abuse that they suffered while at Irving, let alone receive a measure of redress, while living with the lifelong damage to their bodies and spirits. The scrutiny must not stop with examining the actions of one individual. This is about the larger picture, ICE and the private prison corporation La Salle. Irving should be shut down immediately, and people should be freed. And the US government, as well as a private prison corporation running this prison, should be held accountable. We are glad that a few members of Congress are taking this seriously. So 12 members of Congress came down about a month ago and met with the detained immigrant women. They also toured the facility, and that was a transformative experience for them because after they got out, they were actively calling for the facility to be shut down, calling it a horror show. And also a resolution put forward by Representative Jayapal condemning the gynecological procedures and asking for an investigation passed the House overwhelmingly. In addition, Representative Tlaib and the squad sent a letter to the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, and their letter was joined by other representatives as well of the House, asking for an investigation of the Department of Homeland Security, which is pretty significant. My understanding is that this is the first time members of Congress are calling on the United Nations to investigate a branch of the US government. And we are determined to push ahead by pursuing a thorough congressional investigation, DHS OIG investigation, and we will also go to the UN and the Inter-American Commission to expose the human rights violations. We are also actively trying to shut down the Stewart Detention Center, which is another horrid facility in South Georgia, also privately operated, run by CoreCivic, the largest prison corporation in the US. Used to be called Corrections Corporation of America, CCA, and their public relations people probably advised them to change their name because of the horrible history so it's associated with that name. But changing of the name definitely did not erase that history. So they have a forced labor program at the facility, meaning that instead of hiring regularly waged employees, they are relying on the forced labor of detained immigrants and then paying them between $1 to $4 a day, sometimes nothing at all. So our client in a class action suit that Project South is a part of, Shoaib Ahmed, worked for a few days and did not get anything in return. So he said, no work tomorrow. And for that, they placed him in solitary confinement. And he has now been deported and he continues to suffer from the impact of the days in solitary and his general experience at the Stewart. There have now been 3 people who have died at Stewart during the pandemic, 2 elderly people and 1 with pre-existing conditions who had diabetes, which poses the question as to why ICE continues to hold people who are elderly or have pre-existing conditions in a deadly facility. So Cipriano Chavez Alvarez was 61. He died of COVID-19 in September after being detained at the Stewart Detention Center. He's the 3rd person to die from COVID-19 this year at the facility. And there have been many confirmed cases at Stewart. And this news comes just over a month after the preventable death of Jose Freddy Guillen Vega, a 70-year-old who died of COVID-19 complications while in ICE custody after being detained at Stewart. And in May, Santiago Baten Axlach, who was 34, of Guatemalan descent, died of COVID-19. He was also detained at Stewart. Since 2017, 7 people have died in ICE custody after being detained at Stewart. 2 of them by suicide after hanging themselves after being placed in solitary confinement for prolonged periods of time. We know that solitary damages a person's psyche, and especially if an individual already has emotional and mental health issues, they should not be placed in solitary confinement. And yet, that is what the Stewart continues to do. So, as we're talking about immigration detention and abuses against immigrants in Georgia and, really across the country, we also need to be talking about the roots of forced migration because nobody wakes up one day and says to themselves, okay, I think I would like to move to the US because that's what I like to do today. The decision has a lot of obviously repercussions for people, ripping people out from where they are, separating them from their families. It is a painful experience. And so a lot of people are forced to migrate. They flee for their lives. They are facing persecution. They're facing abuse, torture, threats of being killed or raped, or they're facing economic deprivation. And so as we're talking about this, we have to look at the role of US foreign policy in creating the destabilizing conditions for people, forcing them to flee their homes. So I'm sure folks are familiar with the history of US government intervention in Latin America and Central America in the 70s and 80s with many coups and supporting dictatorial regimes, also in Africa, the Middle East, in many parts of the global South. I myself am from Iran, and a lot of Iranians can tell you about the 1953 coup that toppled the first democratically elected prime minister of Iran, Mossadegh, because he wanted to nationalize Iranian oil. And so to this day, a lot of Iranian immigrants, including myself, pose the question as to what would have happened if that coup had not happened and if Iranians had been able to experience true democracy. And the destabilizing and destructive role of US foreign policy continues to this day. So, relatively recently, in 2009, you had the military coup against the democratically elected president in Honduras, Manuel Zelaya. And so that led to destabilization, to deaths, to persecution, including the murder of Berta Cáceres, an indigenous environmental rights activist. I was actually part of a delegation to Honduras in 2003 where we met with, in 2013, where we met with Berta Cáceres, and she told us about the threats that she was facing. Many activists and labor rights activists and human rights activists were similarly facing threats by the US-supported regime. And so that really resulted in people from Honduras having to flee for their lives to come to the US. And then when they come here, the US government, instead of providing them refuge, places them in these really horrible detention centers, as we have been talking about. So we need to be talking about the connections, the roots of forced migration, and as we're talking and working on shutting these detention centers down, we also need to be talking about fundamentally transforming US foreign policy so that it is not based on exploitation of other people's natural resources and domination over the world, rather based in principles of dignity and respect and respecting other people's sovereignty and self-determination.
Please join us in singing hymn 121, We'll Build a Land. We'll build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where we captives go free. Where the oil of gladness dissolves the mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Oh,
The vision of this congregation is to be a beacon of peace, justice, and love. This vision is embodied here, not just in words, but in each and every one of us. By your commitment of time, energy, and resources, together we make this community. As you are able, please affirm your support for the sustainability of this congregation and the ongoing ministries that we share through a monetary offering. The methods of giving are being displayed on the screen.
So I look forward to working with you all. As US-based people, we have a huge responsibility to people in the rest of the world, and who then become migrants in this country to protect and defend people. And I would like to now leave you with this quote from Fannie Lou Hamer: "Nobody is free until everybody is free." Thank you very much.
Before we extinguish our chalice, I would like to remind you about the annual Ecumenical Thanksgiving celebration that will be held virtually this coming Thursday at 6:30. This is a celebration of 20 different faith traditions responding to the theme, "Act Now, Silence is Not an Option." You can find the link of this Ecumenical Thanksgiving celebration in the Emerson Notebook. As we extinguish this chalice, please join me in the response in your order of service. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the fire of commitment, or the warmth of community. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world until we are together again. Our worship has ended. Now let the service begin.